got a comment the other day that said, philosophy isn't a guide for life. I think that this comment is wrong. However, I know that there are people like nihilists who study philosophy but do not apply it to their own lives. For instance, I watched a YouTuber review Peter Singer's Animal Liberation. He acknowledged the arguments, but then at the end he said he's still going to eat meat. I don't get that at all. While it is true that it is specifically the subcategory of normative ethics that is concerned with the rightness and wrongness of our actions, even something more abstract like metaphysics still applies directly to our behavior. For instance, if you believe in the Catholic God, then you better be praying, following the Ten Commandments, going to confession, etc., and doing all these rituals that will save you from eternal torture. What I care about on this channel is normative ethics. I don't see any point in doing science or philosophy if you're not going to use it for good in some way or positive change. So the subject of this video is Efilism. Efilism is antinatalism applied to the non-human animals. It's the understanding that these beings feel as deeply as we do and their suffering deserves equal consideration. So every vegan should be an Efilist, lest they become a speciesist bigot. So how do we apply Efilism to our lives? For example, just like vegans, we boycott all industries that use animals as objects and exploit and torture them. That would be meat, dairy, and egg and fur industries, and any product that experiments on animals. We don't buy animals from pet stores or breeders. We want no animals being bred for any purpose because they will suffer and die. Obviously, we either use birth control, abstain from sex, or get sterilized, which is what I did. We promote antinatalism, veganism, and adoption and other negative utilitarian principles and practices to lower the net suffering on this planet. We oppose and attack pro-life and other pro-suffering deluded groups like nihilists. We are pro-euthanasia and the right to die. But my question is, how actively should we be involved in the lives of non-human animals? I would prefer to provide answers on this channel only, not questions, but I don't know everything. I'm just a student of ethics, not a philosopher, and I just want to share something that I struggle with in my own life. So this is mainly to create a talking point. I think my wife would probably be upset with me if she caught me smashing nests with a stick. She has more of a conservationist attitude towards the animals, where she thinks we should just leave them the fuck alone. Poodle Susan expressed a similar attitude in one of her comments, but I personally prefer the good bus driver metaphor, in that we humans have the knowledge and the power, and therefore the responsibility to do something to prevent suffering, and it's only doing an animal a favor by preventing its birth. I'd also like to state that this is not a promortalism video. This is about prevention, in the same way that an abortion prevents suffering. I don't consider abortion to be promortalism. I bought this parcel of land in 2010 so that we could get away from other humans and give our dogs room to run around and exercise. I don't go to public gyms, and I never wanted to take my dogs to public dog parks. When we lived in the city, we had to walk our one dog at a time around the neighborhood. In that period, we got attacked by 2 pit bulls and a Rottweiler because their idiot owners did not leash them or even have a dog fence. We also got threatened by neighbors who didn't like our dog barking. Living in a city just sucks ass. I'll never do it again. The next house we get will have even more land so we can get further away from disgusting human beings. There's a lot of life here, and therefore a lot of death. I wasn't really prepared for it. I've seen the biggest insects ever in my life, as well as copious amounts of snakes, field mice, rabbits, possums, raccoons, turtles, cranes, voles, moles, etc. I also didn't think about all the animals I would be killing, accidentally. Like garter snakes getting mowed over, rabbits getting mauled by my dogs, mice who jump into empty 5-gallon buckets and die because they couldn't get out. The list goes on and on. I suppose if I wanted to avoid this, I could just go back to living in a concrete shoebox apartment. But that wouldn't accomplish anything because some other person would just be here letting the animals suffer. And they'd probably use glue traps or poison or some other cruel shit on the pest animals. I use catch and release traps for mice. The ideal solution, of course, would be to just keep them out permanently of my outbuildings, but somehow they keep getting in, and sometimes they even get into the house itself. So then I release them to get killed in some other brutal, horrible way. I mean, should I instead terminate them as quickly and as painlessly as possible? But this is a question for another video, because I didn't really want to get into promortalism on this, but it is something that I struggle with. So this video is about prevention, so let's talk about blackbirds. These red-winged blackbirds are attracted to marshlands and especially to cattails, which this pond has plenty of. We are so oblivious to the sounds of animals that I didn't even realize that they nested here until I used my giant razor blade to cut some of the cattails down a couple years ago. It got caught under some cattails that had a nest in it. They were built right above the water, like about 6 inches. So I had to get on a raft so that I could remove it without disturbing the nest. The blackbirds get very agitated when I go near them. You can see the males in the trees above, always watching and warning. But it made me think about the nests. Now that I've seen them do this over the past few years, I could destroy the nests before they lay their eggs in them, or I could even destroy them after they lay them. It doesn't really matter. Efilists and antinatalists promote abortions, so destroying an egg before it hatched is not an ethical problem. So why don't I do it? Since I'm not killing, it does not cross the line into promortalism. It would cause distress and suffering to the mother and father birds, but is their minor suffering equal or greater than the suffering that their progeny will experience? As this article shows, they are primed to experience all kinds of unfortunate fates that we cannot even predict. Nearly 1 billion birds die in the U.S. every year just by flying into windows. It's happened at my house. The second leading cause of bird death is mauling by cats. But even my terrier ate a living bird in a single bite. So dogs also kill them, but the birds just have to be a little bit slower. Raccoons, mink, foxes, and snakes are predators of blackbird nests. So even though it seems crazy to build a nest only a foot above the waterline, it does make it inaccessible to those critters, so I can see why they evolved to do it. In Ann Arbor, we have this controversial deer sterilization program. Opponents say it's too expensive. I know in Mendham would be pro-euthanasia for domestic animals that are overpopulated, but I don't know if he would include wild animals like deer. Once a cat or dog is unconscious before sterilization, a quick and painless death would be more merciful than leaving it to a fate like getting hit by a car or starving to death. Certainly domesticated animals have a lower chance of survival, and that does go along with current public policy regarding pet overpopulation. No-kill shelters are in the minority. We realize that death can be better than life in that instance. Ingrid Newkirk of PETA is very pro-euthanasia and has no ethical problem putting down an unwanted dog or cat because it is in the animal's best interest, even though that animal may have a subjective interest in continuing to live. Blackbirds have been known to dive bomb humans who get too close to their nests, and even though it's never happened to me before, I believe it because they get extremely agitated when I come around. This is the only real pest type of behavior they exhibit. They also create noise pollution with their constant calls, and they also chase other birds away from the pond. As you can see, I have a lot of cattails, and I don't like them personally. When we moved here, they weren't nearly as bad, so clearly the previous owner killed them or uprooted them somehow. But my wife and I agreed that when we moved here, we wouldn't infringe on the animal habitats if we didn't have to. They have so few places left to go now. However, giving wild animals a habitat is like giving bridge cards to poor people. You get more and more of them. You know, I would love to build a little mouse house out in the woods so that they wouldn't come near my outbuildings. But that would just make things worse. So it'd probably be best to cut down all the cattails and remove the habitat, thus leading to less births, and therefore less suffering. I don't think my wife would be cool with that, but I'm talking about what we should do as humans for the animals as a policy. Prevention is best, but what about aborting these birds before they are born by actively destroying their nests? The reason I don't destroy them is the same reason I didn't kill either of my ferrets when they were experiencing the agony of death. Just human weakness. They were clearly suffering greatly, but I just couldn't bring myself to kill them. If I had a ferret again, I would learn my lesson, and I would just put them in a plastic bag and fill it with CO2 and end it humanely. I wouldn't let them suffer like that again. But I remember at the time that it felt wrong to be a killer. I knew it was just me shirking my responsibility. I wanted God or nature or someone else, anyone else, to take care of it. But it really was my responsibility. I do destroy mouse nests where I find them, because they always build them under the hood of my lawnmower or in my greenhouse. They are really destructive pests who carry disease. I don't feel great about doing it, but in those cases it's either me or them. I have destroyed nests that I discovered in mother mouse and her babies. They have up to 4 litters a year, so I'm constantly finding baby mice. Sometimes I just let them go, and sometimes, like if the nest is destroyed and the mother ran away, I've had to euthanize them. The animals don't know what they're doing when they create life. They're just following their programming. But we humans have risen above our software, and we know, because of philosophy, because of ethics, that it's better never to have been. So I won't go actively hunting for nests to destroy, but if I come across a nest of unhatched eggs, I'm not against destroying it for the good of the potential beings inside. I made this video because I'd like to know what other Efilists and antinatalists think about our responsibilities to the animals. Should we just make arguments, or should we actively do whatever we can to prevent their suffering? I know this is kind of like debating the limits of how much we can do as vegan activists. We should always be doing more. Should we be walking into Steak and Shake and slapping hoagies out of people's mouths? I mean, boycotting animal products, getting sterilized, and rescuing cats and dogs clearly isn't enough. Reducing suffering in any way we can should be our #1 priority, but are we willing to do it? So thanks for watching another Life Sucks production. Thank you for all the comments you've left in my previous videos. I really enjoy reading them. So thanks again, and see you next time.